Let me tell you what class is about tonight. First of all, I hope you've all had a chance to eat something. Okay, now I started realizing as I was watching the movie with you, Legend of the Destruction, there was so much information there. Most of it I recognized from my own Gemara learning over the years, but a certain amount, some of this Josephus stuff, I really had never heard about. Queen Berenice, I didn't know from Queen Berenice. And I knew about Bar Giora, and I didn't know about Ben Batish by the name Ben Batish. I knew the name Abba Sikara. And then I later learned that that's the same as Ben Batish. And so I started learning. And I started feeling a little bit bad that, if I had known in advance how much information was going to be in that movie, I would have devoted 2 weeks beforehand for us to learn Gemaras that talk about it. And I just thought this movie is going to be a variation on the movie we saw, or the film we saw, Eicha Night, something that would be heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching, but I didn't expect so much information. And it occurred to me that, you know what, on the last Thursday we met, before Tisha B'Av, I started teaching some Gemara. And even though it's a little bit out of sync, in that it might have been better if I had learned it with you 2 weeks earlier, I want to learn with you this week, and maybe even next week if I can't cover all of it, the rest of the Gemaras that deal with Tisha B'Av and Tu B'Av. Very, very important. So that you not only should think it's like a film, but I'd like you to learn it in the text of the Gemara. And as I started preparing these texts, it enriched me once again, even though I've learned it several times. It enriched me. You know what? It's like, imagine you read a book and then you see the movie. You already read the book. It's better than the movie, but it's interesting to see the movie. Now imagine instead you first see the movie, The 10 Commandments by Cecil DeMille, and then you read the book, the Torah. Turns out Moshe Rabbeinu did not have a girlfriend. Turns out, and so it enriches to learn it in the text. And it also falls under the general overall Thursday night program, Ethics and Values in War. What's more, the Jewish war than the war with the Romans? And in fact, that's the title of Josephus' 6 volumes or 8 volumes, The Wars of the Jews with the Romans. And we learn a lot about when you do fight, and that's one of the last things as I get into this now. When do you fight? When don't you fight? And we saw Tuesday night, we're going to see again. It becomes a very big issue. When to fight, when not to fight, as part of the ethics and values of Jewish war. We're not Romulans and Klingons that we just fight and fight and fight and live. When you talk Romulans and Klingons, you're also talking Arabs. And we're not people who live to fight and live to die, and just live to die, and proudly, like the last words of Haniah the day before he met his virgins, was he lives to die. So Baruch Hashem, his dream came true. Israel made Havdalah on him. And so as a result of that, that's how they live. We don't live like that. We live to live. And it's very important. We fight to live. They live to die. So you had one faction, Bar Giora, Abba Sikara, John of Giscala, who they wanted to fight no matter what. And then there were the rabbis, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and others who had the big picture ahead of them. Are we going to be wiped out, God forbid? Maybe we're not going to win this war. But can we salvage Judaism? And one of these days we'll get it back. We'll get back Israel. We'll get back Jerusalem. It'll take some time, 2,000 years, give or take. And one day, the Pope will be sitting in Jerusalem, listening to Yehoram Gaon singing about how we will never leave Jerusalem until Mashiach comes. And Pope knows what he's talking about. And so Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, in the debate over the ethics and values of war, said, this is not the time to fight. There's a time for, as in Kohelet, Perek Gimel, Ecclesiastes chapter 3. There's a time for peace and a time for war. And there's a moment not to fight. And this, of course, is the current debate now in Israel as well. Is it time to stop fighting in Gaza? Gallant, the defense minister, says we're never going to win this war. We've done plenty. We've accomplished 50% of what we wished, and we're not going to accomplish more. And now the Biden administration just came out and said, you're not going to accomplish more. You've accomplished all you're going to accomplish, and all you're going to do the rest of the way is kill civilians. You're not going to kill any more Hamas. So that's one opinion. It's time to stop. And along the way, some of the boys who might, God forbid, die in the future, if the war continues, won't die. And the other position is, this is not the time to stop. Hamas is still there. If we stop, then when they start getting concrete and steel sent to them from around the world to rebuild Gaza, they're not going to use the concrete and steel to rebuild Gaza. They're going to use it to build more tunnels and to build more weapons. And if they aren't destroyed, it'll never stop. And Sinwar will come out of his tunnel and will start dancing in the streets with half of the remaining living Hamas dancing. We survived Israel. They could not destroy us. And that's the debate. And there's good arguments to be made on each side. And part of the way that we learn and decide is we learn from Jewish history, and we learn from the rabbis, and then we apply it. And by the way, there's a difference. Before someone says, well, let's learn from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He said, stop fighting and let's make a deal and give up Arutz Israel, but hold on to Yavne, and we can learn there. So let's understand the difference. In his time, he was facing Romans, and a few weeks later, they're going to be burning down Yerushalayim and the Beit HaMikdash. So he was trying to salvage what he could. Judaism, country was lost. Yerushalayim was lost. Beit HaMikdash was lost. But Judaism was not lost. That's what we're all doing here tonight. All over the world, Jews are learning Torah tonight, and every night, and every day. And there's Yerushalayim, because that was one thing. Israel right now, dealing with Hamas, it's a different situation. So that's like what we learn in law school. An important part of law school, in general, law. I teach that as a law professor, recently retired. You teach students, you have to look for cases that have facts and arguments similar to that in your case, for your client, cases that come out where the judge rules the way you want. And then you point out to the judge, here's this case, this case, this case, this case, and it all came out the way we're asking it to come out. And the other lawyer on the other side, his or her job is to show the judge, it's true that case came out that way, that there's a difference in the facts, Your Honor. In that case, the guy did X, Y, Z, and in this case, the guy did A, B, C. In that case, the government this, and in this case, the government that. In that case, and so on and so forth. And if all else fails, that case was in Texas, and this case is in California, which is different law. And so you distinguish. And then the other lawyer comes back and says, Your Honor, by actually that case and this case are very similar. And da, 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 da. So that's how we have to learn Jewish history also, and Jewish law. It is true that in the debate whether we should stop fighting and make peace and get what we could, or whether we should keep fighting, in that case, we had legions and legions and legions of Romans who were going to destroy the Beit HaMikdash, not to mention Yerushalayim, and massacre thousands and thousands. And we didn't have the manpower. There was no way. So the better deal was to see what we could salvage. And in this case, we have enough weapons, and we're winning, and they're losing, and half of them are dead, and half of Gaza is underground, and the other half of Gaza is above ground underground, and it's a completely different situation. So all of that is part of how we approach it. Here we go. And remembering, the reason the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed in the second case was Jews fighting Jews. And we learned in the second film how historically that existed, and we're going to learn more of it right now. Jews fighting Jews. Here we go. Thank you very much for being here, and it's a pleasure to be able to say thank you again. First of all, Tana Rabbanan. This is Misekhat Ta'anit, Tractate Ta'anit 30a. Daf Lamed Amud Aleph. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Kol mitzvot hanohagot ba'avel, nohagot b'tisha b'av. All the laws that apply during mourning, M-O-U-R-N, like Yom Kippur, nohagot b'tisha b'av. This is where it comes from. Asur ba'achilu uv'shtiya. You're not allowed to eat, not allowed to drink. Uv'sicha, you're not allowed to dip things in, to put oils, to use the word anointing, to put creams and oils on. Uv'ne'ilat hasandal. And you're not allowed to wear sandals or shoes that have leather. That applies to leather leather soles or leather uppers. Sometimes there's artificial soles, rubber soles, or whatever, but the upper part is leather. However, if it's got a logo like Nike or Adidas or something, and that's leather, but everything else is so-called man-made, that's allowed. Uvitashmi shamita, and husbands and wives are not allowed to have physical intimacy on Yom Kippur or in Tisha B'Av. The asur lekrot b'Torah b'neviim uktuvim, and you're also not allowed to learn Torah. Did you know that? Not allowed to learn Tanakh, the Bible, not the Torah, the 5 books, not the prophets, not the things we learn on Tuesday night and Thursday night, and not even Psalms or anything like that. V'lishnot b'Mishnah v'Talmud of the Midrash. You're not allowed to learn Gemara, Mishnah, not allowed to learn Midrash, anything, because it is regarded as one of the greatest joys that a Jew has in life. What's the joy for other people who don't have our values? Going to the bar and getting drunk, going to a sports event, going to an opera, which is okay, going to a movie, which is okay. For us, one of the greatest, if not the greatest joy, is actually spending time learning Torah. We learn our history, we learn the Word of God, and that's the purpose of our lives, to serve God. So instead of hearing it secondhand and thirdhand, in the best of all worlds, we learn it straight, like we're doing now, as we're doing now. As a fallback, if there's no other way we can learn from the text itself, so we try to find a teacher. And if we can't do that, we try to get recordings that we listen to in the car. But that's a great joy. So you cannot do that on Yom Kippur or on Tisha B'Av. Although Mokore hu b'mkom she'eno ragil likrot, v'shona b'mkom she'eno ragil lishnot, v'kore b'kinot b'iyuv, you are allowed to learn a little certain parts of Torah, such as the book of Job, where his entire world falls apart. And through faith, he survives it and holds on by his faith, and his world comes back. Uvivarm harayim shabiyirmiyah. And what we learned 2 weeks ago in the book of Jeremiah, the end of the second book of Kings, about the destruction of Yerushalayim. You're allowed to learn that. However, v'tinokot shel beit rabban b'tailin mishum shenamar pikudei Hashem yashar mesamchei lev. And likewise, we don't have children going to yeshiva and learning on Tisha B'Av, because again, it makes you happy. So we're going to go forward. I'm going to skip some of these others, because after all, we were just talking about this is after Yom Kippur, this is after Tisha B'Av, and God willing, we'll learn it more again on time next year, if Mashiach hasn't come first, which really, God willing, is what we're really holding. Okay, Tanan Hatam, it was learned. Makom shenahagu lasot melacha b'Tisha B'Av osin. There was a teaching. Are you allowed to go to work on Tisha B'Av? And again, better if I had taught it a week ago, a week and a half ago. It didn't occur to me. I did try to put all of that out into teachings that I dropped in the course of the other classes and in my emails, but you're not supposed to go to work ideally on Tisha B'Av. But if you live in a community where everybody basically goes to work, osin, you're allowed to go to work also. Makom shenahagu shelo lasot ein osin. If you live in a religious community where no one goes to work on Tisha B'Av, then you don't go. Again, the Shabbat restrictions don't apply. You're allowed to turn on the lights and handle money and drive a car, and you're allowed to do those things. It's kind of weird, awkward that you're following all these Yom Kippur rules, and yet you're able to do regular day rules. That's Tisha B'Av. So technically, you can go to work. And again, if you're in a community, I don't want to say like the community I live in, but let's say you live, I don't know, Montana, and I apologize to religious Jews of Montana, but let's say there's one shul in all of Montana. And let's say most Jews, I'm not talking about assimilated Jews, but let's say it's the kind of community where even the Orthodox Jews go to work in Montana. Let's just say. After all, if you're living in Montana and you're an attorney, you have to do your billings. So let's say they're doing their billings in Montana, and everybody does it. So then you're allowed to go to work on Tisha B'Av too. If you're living in Borough Park or Crown Heights, Brooklyn, Flatbush, where everybody, you don't work on Tisha B'Av, then you're not supposed to be the one who does. And even if you're living in Montana, whether Billings or Bozeman, a Talmud Chacham, someone who knows Torah, learns Torah, rabbi or yeshiva person who lives there, is not allowed to work, even if everybody else there works. Rabban Shimon Gamliel Omer, and this great rabbi taught, La'olam ya'aseh kol adam atzmo k'talmid chacham. This rabbi said, when it comes to Tisha B'Av, every Jew should consider himself a Talmud Chacham, a Torah scholar. In other words, every Jew should think of himself and herself, I'm on the level that I should not work on Tisha B'Av. Tanya Nami Hachi Rabban Shimon Gamliel Omer, and it also was taught in the name of this rabbi, Li'olam ya'aseh adam atzmo k'talmid chacham k'dei shayit aneh. There's something similar. A person should regard himself as such a person on such a level that no matter what, he fasts on Tisha B'Av and doesn't go to work. Tanya Idach Rabban Shimon Gamliel Omer. Now, remember the Gemara is Rava and Ravina, two great rabbis of the Amoraic period, Amoraim, in Iraq, then Babylonia. They sent out to salvage Judaism for the next number of thousands of years. Torah was being taught in yeshivot all around Babylonia, which had become a great Torah center, the center of the Talmud. Initially, it was barren of Jews till Babylonia exiled the Jews from Eretz Israel, burned down the Beit HaMikdash, and brought us all to Babylonia. And they brought great Torah scholars. And next thing you knew, we had people like Daniel, and others were in government and great Torah scholars, and eventually the great rabbis of the Talmud. And Babylonia became a great Torah center. Many, many cities, just like in the United States, for example, where you have parts of Brooklyn, you have parts of Los Angeles, parts of Florida, a number of places, parts of like Baltimore, Maryland, places where there's a lot of Torah. And of course, like Eretz Israel. But even the exile there, like the United States, there's a lot of different places where real Torah centers. So Rabban Shimon Gamliel Omer, why are they quoting Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel like the third or fourth time with the same basic thing? What they're bringing out in the Talmud is we've got reports that different yeshivot quoted Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in slightly different nuances, saying basically the same thing. We're not sure exactly which one is the quote from him. So since they're similar, we're putting them all in to preserve his words. He also said, Kol ha'ochel v'shoteh b'tisha b'av, any Jew who eats or drinks on the 9th of Av, ki'ilu ochel v'shoteh b'yom kippurim. It is as though he ate or drank on Yom Kippur. So a Jew might think to himself, herself, you are allowed to drive on Tisha B'Av, you're allowed to turn lights on, you're allowed to handle money, you're allowed to go shopping, let's say for food, groceries. So I'll take a little bit of water, I'm thirsty, I'll eat a little something. It's not such a big thing. Basically, I'm fasting, I'll go to Rabbi Fischer's movie, it'll be interesting, I'll have a nice day. So he's saying, no. When it comes to eating and drinking on Tisha B'Av, would you eat and drink on Yom Kippur? If a person would, God forbid for his soul. But if a person wouldn't, then Tisha B'Av is the same level of severity. Rabbi Akiva, you've heard of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, look, we just learned that if you're in a community where everybody goes to work, you could also go to work. Rabbi Akiva says you can go to work, but if you go to work on Tisha B'Av, eino ro'eh siman bracha li'olam, you'll never see nachas from that money. In other words, let's say you work in a law firm, because that I know from myself. Let's say you work at a law firm, not in Brooklyn, New York, in a religious law firm, but a bunch of non-Jews. And you're a litigator. And there's a deposition you have to defend, or there's a filing deadline, and it's Tisha B'Av, and you couldn't get out of it. And they tell you, you're the one handling the case, and we need you here to do this. And you beg and you try to get out of it. And go ahead and explain at Jones Day what Tisha B'Av is. I've already taken off for Rosh Hashanah, they're angry. I already took off for Yom Kippur, they're angry. When I told them I'm taking off for Sukkot, they never heard of such a thing. When I told them about Shmini Atzeret, they went through the roof. When I told them about Simchas Torah, he's taken off for everything. They thought I'm making these things up. Mamish. I remember Dan McClune, one of the big lady, it's a whole long story, but he thought I was making these things up. He thought I was selling drugs. And it was just, he told me. He said, do you have like some big drug deal going on? It was my first year there in October. Every day I had another holiday. He said, what the hell religion is this with a holiday? I'm going to convert. And I remember I said to Dan, I'm a rabbi. I have the authority to convert you. The thing is, you wouldn't be qualified. So anyway, what ends up happening is that you go to them in Tisha B'Av in August and you start telling them, I'm going to take off the day. So you have to go to work. So what the Gemara is saying, Reb Dov, if you can't get out of it and you're not living in Borough Park, you can go to work. You're allowed. And go ahead and write a good brief and beat the other guy. Let's say you're going to need 2,200 billable hours by the end of the year. And let's say you bill 12 hours that day. You better bill 2,212 hours, because God is going to take away 12 billable hours from you. How's he going to do that? I don't want to take the time, but they take some of your billables off if they think you bill too much. And so you won't see nachas. Let's say you're an hourly employee, you work at Starbucks, I don't know, and you're a barista, like Ocasio. So let's say you're paid whatever Starbucks pays an hour. For that 8 hours that you worked at Starbucks on Tisha B'Av, let's say, I'm making up the number, let's say it's $20 an hour, I don't know. So for that $160, a person will lose $160 during the rest of the year that they would not otherwise. How's that going to happen? You'll get a parking ticket. You'll get a speeding ticket that otherwise you wouldn't have gotten. You'll get ripped off for $160. You won't see bracha from that money. That's what it means. And so you're not supposed to work on Tisha B'Av. Again, I know we already had Tisha B'Av, but it's good Torah learning, and we're going into this. Here we go. Very important also. And all of us, Baruch Hashem, took care of this. Chachamim Omrim, the sages say, Kol ha'osem melacha b'Tisha B'Av, ve'einu mitabel al Yerushalayim, whoever goes to work on Tisha B'Av. That we found there's a little bit of a leniency, though you won't have nachas from it. And on top of it, a person who goes to work and does not mourn the destruction of Jerusalem. So if you're working at Jones Day on Tisha B'Av, working on a litigation, you have to be there without leather shoes. And you have to really, not loud, but you have to be crying and having tears during the day for Yerushalayim. And you have to have Yerushalayim in mind. And you have to not joke. You're a barista at Starbucks on Tisha B'Av, you have to not joke around with the customers. Don't insult them, but that's not a day to joke around. A Jew who goes to work and does not mourn for Jerusalem on Tisha B'Av, eino ro'eh b'simchata. That Jew will never see the joy and celebration of Jerusalem when she is rebuilt, which by implication means might not be there at the time of Mashiach. That when Mashiach comes and Yerushalayim is rebuilt, which it is not yet rebuilt because the Temple Mount is barren. There is no Beit HaMikdash there, just that thing up there. And so it's still unrebuilt. And when the day comes that mosque is out of the way and that the Beit HaMikdash is rebuilt in times of Mashiach, will we be there? A Jew who does not mourn for Tisha B'Av will not merit seeing the day. As it says, Simchu et Yerushalayim v'gilu ba kol ohaveha, be joyous for Jerusalem and rejoice, all those who love her. Sisu ita, celebrate with her. Masos kol hamidablim olaha. And so from this they learn, kol hamidabel Yerushalayim zochevero abesimchata, whoever mourns for Jerusalem, by the way, beyond Tisha B'Av, will merit seeing the rebuilding and joy of Yerushalayim, v'she'eno mitabel Yerushalayim, and whoever does not mourn, and it's not only Tisha B'Av, but certainly Tisha B'Av, v'Yerushalayim, eno ro'eh b'simchata, right? It's like you have to keep Shabbat. That doesn't mean you're not supposed to keep kosher all week, but especially on Shabbat, but always all week. So just like it's Tisha B'Av and you should mourn for Yerushalayim, you should always think of Yerushalayim. And that's, I mean, so many times in our classes, Sunday and Tuesday and Thursday, I talk about Arutz Yisrael and Yerushalayim. Tanya nami hachi kol ha'ochel basar v'shota yayin b'Tisha B'Av. Likewise, similarly, it was taught that in the same way someone who eats meat or drinks wine on Tisha B'Av will not see the rebuilding of Tisha B'Av. Okay, now I'm going to skip some of these that take us, again, because of the timing and everything like that. But I want to teach you the basics. Okay. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, this rabbi is really quoted a lot in this particular sugyot or section of Gemara. Lo hayu yamim tovim liYisrael k'chamisha b'av. U'chiyom kippurim. The two happiest days in Judaism, he says, are Yom Kippur and the 15th of Av. That's 6 days later than Tisha B'Av. Which day this year is going to be the 15th of Av? Let's take a quick look. 15th of Av. The 15th of Av this year, I didn't really look at it in advance. The 15th of Av will be this coming Sunday night Monday. This coming Sunday night Monday will be Tu B'Av. So this coming Sunday night Monday, Tu B'Av, is the happiest with Yom Kippur, the two happiest days of the year. So the question is, are you kidding me? I was really building up a lot of respect for this Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. I mean, I've never been quoted in the Talmud. He's quoted all over this Talmud. And now he tells me the happiest days of Judaism and Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av. I thought they were like Purim and simplest Torah. So, and the Gemara goes beyond that. The other rabbis say, when it comes to Yom Kippur, he's absolutely right. Of course. He didn't even have to say it. That goes without saying. Bishlama Yom Kippurim. Of course, Yom Kippur is the happiest day in the Jewish year. What? What about Simchas Torah and Purim? Mishum de'it be'slicha mechila. Because on that day, your soul is cleaned. It's nice when you've been wearing dirty clothes, you bring it to the cleaner, the dry cleaner, and you bring it home and it's all clean and ironed and you can wear it to somewhere fancy. Your soul, God forbid, let's say a soul gets filthy with all the schmutz out there. And on Yom Kippur, it's like you're bringing your soul to the dry cleaner. And instead of them telling you it'll be ready in 5 days, even though they have nothing to do for the next 5 days, but God forbid they should have it later that day. Imagine same day service. Your soul comes out clean and ironed and fresh. That's Yom Kippur. And your soul brings you to the world to come. So what could be happier? You're crying? Okay, it's tears of joy, actually. As much as more. Sure, we're going no eating, no sleeping, because we need that as part of the cleansing. But it's a great joy. Yom Shenitnu Bo Luchot Achronot. And furthermore, it was on Yom Kippur that we got the second set of the 10 pronouncements, the tablets. First set was on Shavuot, the 6th of Sivan, and then Moshe Rabbeinu, after he broke the tablets and the Shiva Sarbat Tammuz, we learned all about that. He broke the tablets on the 17th of Tammuz, and then he went back on the mountain a second time, and he came down on Yom Kippur. So that's a very, very happy day in Judaism, believe it or not. Bigger than Purim, bigger than Pesach, bigger than Simchas Torah. What's the deal with Tu B'Av? Elachamisha Asar B'Av Mahi. And the Gemara says, no. Why is the 15th of Av so special? Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel, Yom Shehut Ru Shvatim Lavo Zabazabu. So let's understand this. Because if I'm a little bit late on providing you the Tisha B'Av learning, so it's so important, we're going to do it this week, and God willing, next week if we don't finish. Tu B'Av, it's perfect time to be teaching about it, because it's coming up this coming week. So 5 things happened on Tu B'Av, I believe. Right? There were 5 things on the 17th of Tammuz, 5 things on Tisha B'Av. One of those things, those of you who learned with me about a year ago year and a half ago, we learned in the book of Shoftim, Judges, about maybe the worst tragedy in Jewish history, maybe worse than the destruction of the temples almost, when the tribe of Benjamin almost got extirpated from the Jewish people, when the other 11 tribes gathered together at war to wipe Benjamin off the face of the earth. And it's a whole long story to go into. It's the last 2 chapters of the book of Shoftim, Judges. And it's anachronistic, although it takes place in the book at the end of all the Judges, actually happened much earlier. Some say at the beginning. And what happened, we of course don't have time for all of that now. It took us about 2-3 classes to cover all of that. But at the very end of that experience, they went to destroy Binyamin from the face of the earth, and they came that close to doing it till God said, stop, it's enough. And they made a vow. Well, we almost killed them out. There's a few left. And we all make a vow, all the other tribes, none of us will give our daughters to any living Benjamin man to marry. And maybe it's the other way also. We won't give no, it was the Benjamin man. And we'll wipe out Benjamin. They won't be able to reproduce. Because it's the boy, it's the man who determines the tribe. The woman determines the religion, the man determines the tribe. And Benjamin was dying now. And on a 15th of Av, a few years later, they got together and they saw it was a different time. And the anger then of what was going on had passed a little bit. And people said, we can't kill out this tribe. This is at the time, but now it's new. And we just can't let this tribe get wiped out. And they decided on the 15th of Av, could have been any day of the year. They chose the 15th of Av. It just happened to be the 15th of Av. It could have been October 1st. And on that day, they made a ruling. We again can marry Benjaminites. We're bringing Benjamin back in. And God reinforced their decision, even though God had set aside the monarchy of the land of Israel and the Jewish people up to Mashiach to be from the house of Judea, from Yehuda, which starts with David and goes to Shlomo, etc., till Mashiach. God made the one exception, validating the decision to bring Benjamin back into the Jewish people by selecting and having Shmuel Hanavi, Samuel the prophet, anoint as the first king of Israel, Saul, Shaul from the tribe of Benjamin, sending the message, I, God Almighty, am bringing Benjamin in as the first king. So not only were you right to bring them back in, but I'm validating it. The first king is from Benjamin, and going forward, it'll be the house of Judah. So first of all, that's one of the great things this coming week when we celebrate the 15th of Av, Tu B'Av, is that Yom Shahutru Shavatim Lavo Zeh B'Zeh. It was on that day, it was initially prohibited to intermarry between the tribes so as to keep each plot of land within the portion. Oh, okay, I jumped ahead too, but what I just said is right. I just said it for the wrong tribe, for the wrong paragraph. There was a separate one. Let me, oops, but I was just jumping ahead. Let's do this one, then I'll go back. It was Yom Shehutar Shevet Binyamin Lavo Bakal. It was the day that the tribe of Benjamin was allowed to marry back into the Jewish people. My daughter Shemar Mimeno V'lo Mibanei. Okay. Having made the oath that none of us, that Ish Yisrael Nishbaba Mitzpah Lemor Ish Mimeno Lo Yitain Bito Levinyamin Lisha. That having made an oath before God, no one of us will allow our daughters to marry Benjamin. How could they violate an oath to God? Gemara asks. And the Gemara answers, they stood by their oath to God. Not one of us will allow our daughters to marry Benjamin, but when our sons are old enough to have daughters, they'd never made that oath. We made the oath, not one of us. Ish Mimenu Lo Yitain Bito will not allow his daughter to marry Benjamin. It does not apply Amarat Mimenu V'lo Mibanenu. So our sons have the right to allow their daughters. So that's one. So it turns out there are two things that happen on the 15th of Av, even more than two. Yom Shehutu Shvatim Lavoza Bazeh. It's the day the tribes were allowed to marry each other. Let me remind you what that is. Remind myself at the same time. In the Torah, there's the story of the daughters of Tzlafchad. Well, there are halachot in the Torah that each tribe is going to be given land. When you get into the land of Israel, now you're in the desert of Sinai. Each tribe will be given land when you get into the Arutz Israel, and then that land, families within a tribe will get part of that, portions within their tribal land. If you're maybe Yisachar will be given land, and your family will get some of that land, and another Yisachar family gets some other land, and so on and so forth. When, God forbid, someone dies, the laws of inheritance, their sons will get land, not the daughters. The inheritance laws were you give the land to the sons, and then their sons, etc., etc. So in the Midbar, in the desert, before they got to the land of Israel, the five daughters of Tzlafchad came to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, our father died. And he didn't die because he was involved in any rebellion of Korach. He died by God's determination for whatever reason, but not out of being rebellious. And there are various rabbinic commentaries on what led to the death of Tzlafchad. They say he was righteous, and if I start, it'll be a long discussion. Let's just say he died, and he left behind no boys. So what about his portion of the land? So the five daughters came to Moshe Rabbeinu and they said, to Moses, our teacher, they said, our dad, our family, it'll be wiped out from Jewish history. Everybody's going to get land but our family. And forget about the financial implications. It'll be like our father never lived. It's not nice. And Moshe Rabbeinu actually said, I'm going to go to God. That's one, let me ask God what to do. And God said, Kain Dovrot Benot Tzlafchad, that the daughters of Tzlafchad are right. And therefore, they should be given portions of land. What would have been their father's portion should be given to them. But there's one problem now. Let's just say they're members of, I don't remember which tribe offhand Tzlafchad was. Maybe somebody here does, but whatever tribe. I'm just saying, let's say it was, since I'm talking about Yisachar anyway. So let's say they were members of Yisachar. Now, they're girls, they're ladies, they're women. What if one of the daughters of Yisachar marries a guy from Zevulun? And the guy from Zevulun, the way finances worked in those days when Joshua conquered Eretz Israel, the man, the husband, he had the bank account, so to speak. He was in charge of the finances, and the assets belonged to him. So now you got a problem. He's from, let's say, the tribe of Zevulun. She's from the tribe of Yisachar. A guy from Zevulun with Zevulun land, she, the owner of Yisachar land, has to move to the Zevulun tribal area to be with her husband, which would be okay in and of itself. Because normally the wife doesn't own land. But now there's a problem. A Zevulun guy is a co-owner of Yisachar land. Next thing you know, they have kids, and before you know it, Yisachar land gets mixed with Zevulun land, and that's not the only family in all of Judaism that has only girls, no boys. And before you know it, all the tribal lands get all mixed up. And it was God's will at that time in history that the lands should be separated. He wanted 12 separate tribes. And how many times have I shown you on Tuesday nights and Thursday nights those maps of Jerusalem, of Arutz Israel, how they're broken into 12 distinct tribal portions, because that was God's will. He wanted tribes, separate tribes. And so the problem became, what do we do? So God said, here's the solution. I'm going to let the daughters of Tzlafchad inherit his land, so his portion to not be lost. But the deal is they're only allowed to marry guys from that tribe. Whereas other Jewish women can marry from any of 12 tribes, they can marry only from one tribe. So it cuts down your choices by 11/12, what, 89%. It's like if you're a single Orthodox guy in New York, you have a lot of choices. And if you're a single Orthodox guy in Oregon, you have fewer choices, unless you go on the internet. And so they have fewer choices, but they're still men in their tribe. And maybe don't be so picky, because the ones who are picky end up not happy anyway. No, but that's the solution. If you want your father's land, you'll have to marry within the tribe. So the land of the tribe does not get diminished. Okay. On the 15th of Av in a subsequent year, not scheduled specifically because it was the 15th of Av, just so happened, on the 15th of Av in a subsequent year, the scholars, the Torah sages of the time made a ruling. Time has passed, circumstances have changed, and as of today, we are allowing the tribes to marry into other tribes. We no longer are concerned about the way the land gets apportioned and ends up getting mixed up. A Jewish woman from Menashe can marry a Jewish woman from Shimon. And we're making that ruling. So that was on Tisha B'Av, Tu B'Av. So you see, that's a big thing. You imagine overnight waking up, you're a single guy or a single woman, 35, 40 years old, and all of a sudden, and you're limited to the following pool of potential marriage partners. And overnight, you get a special ruling from the chief rabbinate of Israel that triples, quadruples, octuples your choices of permitted marriage partners. So that's the second great thing we're going to celebrate this coming week. Number 3. So we got, okay, let's continue. Let's take that off the screen. Let's take that off the screen. Okay, good. Number 3. So how did the rabbis justify changing God's order? God saying, okay, Moshe, thank you for asking. The answer is they can marry, they can get the land, but they can't marry outside the tribe. So what gave them the right to override God, Kivyachol, as though it were possible? My Darush, what was their legal justification? Because the words of the Torah are, that they learned out from the wording of the pasuk that, let's find it, in Bamidbar, Lamed Vav, but Moshe b'nei Yisrael, God commanded Moshe, and then Moshe commanded the Jews, Al Pi Hashem Lemor, by the word of God, Kain Mateh b'nei Yosef Dovrim. This is all true. This is God's commandment to the daughters of Tzlavchad. You're only allowed to marry within your tribe, so that no inheritance of the Israelites may pass from over one tribe to another. But the Israelite heirs, each of them must remain bound to the ancestral portion of their specific tribe. Okay. And the rabbis learned out that it did not apply to subsequent generations. Okay. So that's 2 things, that Benjamin was allowed to marry back in to the Jewish people, and the Jewish people were allowed to marry in to other tribes. Are you noticing a common theme here for the 15th of Av? People getting married. And as a result of that, it actually has become known that Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, is marrying day. It is a day where there's extra focus on getting married or meeting somebody, going out and trying to meet a marriage partner. When I was single after my divorce, before I met Ellen, Zichron Livracha, so I was single. In those days, the internet dating site for Jews was JDate. Over time, JDate got corrupted. Not that the owners were corrupt, God forbid. It got corrupted because a lot of non-Jewish women specifically wanted to marry a Jewish man. Because the stereotype, whether it's right or wrong, is that Jewish men make better husbands. Is it right or wrong? I'm not going to tell you it's wrong, but it's because the image is that a Jewish man doesn't get drunk. Jewish men don't go to the bar and get drunk. Jewish men don't beat up their wives. That's the stereotype. I'd like to think it's true. The nebuch, the shame, the pity for the non-Jewish women who think that's going to work for them is that any Jewish man who's going to marry a non-Jewish woman is not going to have that culture, is not going to have grown up in yeshiva and learned Gemara Thursday night with a rabbi and Tuesday night Navi and Chumash, and is going to be Doug Emhoff. That's what you're going to get. That's what you're going to get. And Bernie Sanders, that's the Jew you're going to get. And they're probably the best because they probably don't go to the bar. So give them that. Well, I was on J-Date. Nowadays, you don't go on J-Date if you're single and you're religious. You go on, I think they have Saw You at Sinai, maybe. They have one or two Frumster, whatever they have now, to sort of bypass all the interlopers trying to pick off the Jewish guys. So anyway, why am I telling you this? Their financial project, how they make a living from it, is the men have to pay a certain amount of money. The women pay a certain amount of money. You can get on for free and look at some profiles, if I recall. But if you really want to see all the profiles, et cetera, you have to pay. On Tu B'Av, one day a year, on Tu B'Av, they put out the publicity, J-Date is free today. Anyone, non-members, non-paying people on Tu B'Av can go on J-Date, unlimited tokens. You can send out as many invitations and as many I remember I came into my office at Jones Day. My divorce was when I was practicing law. I came into Jones Day and I wasn't thinking of that. I other things on my mind, like another crummy day at the office. And I opened my email and there's like 300 emails from women. And it's like, what is this? It's like I was a Hamas member with the glory of having gone up to 72 virgins in heaven 5 times. What was this? And I'm looking at it. It's all J-Date people. So Tu B'Av is a real thing. It's actually, most of us don't know about it. One more word, now we'll learn some more things of Tu B'Av. And I'm glad that the Gemara we're learning today, even though some of it is post Tisha B'Av, some of it is the coming holiday. Back in 1972 was the first time I went to Arutz Israel. So I go to Israel, and they have famous security at the airport. The whole world knows that the most secure airport in the world is Ben Gurion Airport or Lod Airport, I prefer to call it. And everybody knows that. The security is great. First of all, they do profiling. They don't stop 98-year-old nuns. And they do stop dark-skinned guys with mustaches in their 30s. So anyway, they have their ways. So as I was flying back, I have to go through security. And I still remember I go to this woman, and she's just making small talk with me. And she's very pretty, and she's joking with me, and I'm thinking she's flirting with me. And she's just talking with me for a few minutes. No, I wasn't falling in love. And no, I actually was trying to catch my plane, but I was trying to be polite. And she's like flirting with me. And she says to me in like a flirtatious way, today's a day that Jewish men and women meet each other. Today's, what it's called? I said, today's Tu B'Av. She said, okay, you're good. Go into the tickets. That's how she figured out that I'm not an Arab. If this guy with the yarmulke knows that today's Tu B'Av, and so she left. So it's a thing. She wasn't religious per se, but that was like how they were on that day. That's how they were checking certain people to make sure they're legit. So Tu B'Av is a thing. It's a day that people get married. I'm gonna maybe take Denise out on Tu B'Av. Don't get excited, Denise. Maybe it'll just be a cup of coffee, but we'll see what it is. And it's a day to go out. and stay to find a girlfriend or to marry. Okay, number 3. Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan taught, this rabbi, Rabba, the son of Chana. He taught, now work this out. If you know math, it's easier, but you don't have to know math. I'm here for you. There were 603,550 Jewish men between ages 20 and 60 in the Jewish army of the Jews in the Midbar, in the desert, in the book of Numbers, the book of Devarim. And unfortunately, they were the ones who were cursed that they would not enter the land of Israel because of what happened at the Meraglim, the spies that we just covered, Tisha B'Av. So 603,000, just call it even, 600,000 Jewish men, were going to die during the 40 years in the desert. If you do the math, if it came out annually identical every year, what is 600,000 divided by 40 years? I'll save you the trouble. It's 15,000 a year. So according to the Midrash, 15,000 Jewish men died every year for the next 40 years until the whole generation had died, and now it was time to come into the land of Israel. But the Midrash goes on. Since the sin of the Meraglim and the day of tragedy for which God was going to impose punishment was Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, all 15,000 died the 9th of Av each year. Every year, going into the 8th of Av, there were a certain amount of Jews, the same amount as had been for the past 11 months and 28 days, 26 days, whatever. And on that one day, 15,000 Jews died till next year. And the Midrash goes on. How did this happen? Indeed, how were they going to handle the logistics of burying 15,000 people all of a sudden in one day? According to the Midrash, on the eve of Tisha B'Av, every man who had been 20 or over at the time of the curse of the spies, for the next 40 years, every man who was alive of that group had to dig his own grave. That means 600,000 would dig in graves the first year, minus 15, 585,000 would dig in graves the next year, 570,000 would dig in graves the next year, 555,000 the next year, and so on and so forth. Everybody had to sleep that night in their grave. And when Tisha B'Av was over, everyone alive, you didn't eat that day anyway, it was a fast. Everybody alive came out of the graves, and they found 15,000 people still in the graves dead. And that's how they knew 15,000 a year were dying on Tisha B'Av, and people having dug up their own graves, there were the piles of dirt, and others then filled in the dirt. And this went on for 40 years. In the 40th year, there were like a lot. Keep in mind, there were more people in the community of Israel than were digging graves that were dying, because you had the children who were under 20 at the time of the curse, and they were growing up over the 18-year-old child, boy, by now in the 40th year was 58 years old and had children of his own. And so you always had a large population. And there were fewer and fewer each year of those who had gotten the curse. So it's not like everybody was looking and saying, oh, this is who's going to die this year, because you couldn't quite tell. And there were always a lot of people. So in the 40th year, according to the Midrash, everybody, including those under 20, it was the custom, everybody dug their graves. Everybody went in the grave on Tisha B'Av. And everybody came out after Tisha B'Av, and they started looking for the dead people. And they found there's nobody dead. Not a single grave had anybody left who's dead. and they couldn't figure it out. It was like clockwork. Every year on Tisha, about 15,000 people died. And when it's happened 40 years in a row, you can count on it the 41st year also. It's one thing if it happens one day, COVID, God forbid, in the year 2020, but then eventually it slackens off, except when it starts up again. But here, they couldn't figure it out. So it was the 9th of Av. And how does the Jewish calendar work? Based on the sun? No, based on the moon. Right? Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the new month, the new moon. So they started debating what happened. And the common wisdom was somehow the past year we got it conflated and we're off by a day or two. It's probably not the 9th of Av. Maybe it's the 8th of Av or the 6th of Av. We're off. Because nowadays we have calendars. In those days, they didn't. So it was just mutually understood after 40 years in a row, there's no other explanation other than today is not the 9th of Av. So they went back in their graves the next night. And they went back in their graves the next night. And they went back in their grave, and nobody's dying. And then what happened on the 15th of the month? What do you think happened? On the 15th of the month, that's the full moon. When you look, whenever you go out and you see all of a sudden, wow, look at the moon tonight. Wow, that's like a full moon. Go back home and double check. It's the 15th of the Jewish calendar month. That's why God took the Jews out on Pesach, out of Mitzrayim on the 15th of Nisan. So when we trekked out of Egypt, we should have maximum light during our journey. That's why Sukkot is the 15th of Tishrei. So when we go on Sukkot, the first night, light can come in even at night from the full moon. And we can look up and make sure we have a little bit of gap in our schach, because we could see some light. If it would be the beginning of the month or the end of the month, you wouldn't see anything. So when they saw the full moon, they said, today definitely is the 15th of Av, Tu B'Av. That means we definitely had the right count. That means on the 9th of Av, no more people are dying anymore. It's over. The punishment has been paid. And it became a big celebration. Every year thereafter, they would celebrate the 15th of Av. So that's a third thing. The Jewish tribes could intermarry. Benjamin was allowed to come back in and marry. And the tribes came back. That's number 3, on the 15th of Av. The Amar, as the rabbi of the Talmud, whose name was Mar, said, Ad shelo kolu metei midbar lo haya dibur Moshe. And so God did not talk again to Moses from the day of that curse, 40 years early. Did you know that Hashem did not talk to Moshe for like 38 years? You get the impression from the Torah that Moshe and God were talking every day. Prophecy from God, well, actually from the time of the Meraglim, there was no discussion with Moshe, but all this discussion is because the book of Numbers, Bamidbar, it doesn't say it in a verse, but if you look carefully, suddenly the book jumps ahead 38 years. It doesn't say like a curtain dropping in a play 38 years later, like in Les Miserables, where Jean Valjean, he gets out and he gets through the bishop after he steals the silver, and then the curtain goes down and it tells you like 30 years later, he's the mayor of the city. So that's not how the Torah works. It just tells us in Parshas Shlach, chapter 13 to 15, about the story of the spies. And the next thing we know, there's all kinds of problems. By the end of the book, they're already in Arvot Moav. They're already at Moab on the border of the Jordan River. 38 years have passed. So God did not speak to Moshe for like 38 years, 39 years, until all the people of the desert died. Shneimar, as it says. Let's take a look. Let's find it. In Deuteronomy 2. In Deuteronomy 2, Sefer Devarim, chapter 2. Now remember, the punishment of the spies was chapter 13 to 15 in Bamidbar, the book before, book of Numbers. So there's another half book that goes on from the half book of Numbers to the rest of Numbers, Bamidbar. And then Deuteronomy is sort of like a review of everything that was in the previous books, with some new items as well. So as Moshe Rabbeinu was talking to the people as they're just about to enter Eretz Yisrael, in chapter 2 of Devarim, he's reminding them what happened. He says, the hand of Hashem struck them. What's that? The time that we spent in travel from Kadesh Barnea until we crossed the wadi, that's a valley, Zered, was 38 years, right? The first year, we went from Egypt and we built the Mikdash, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, started on the first day of the second year. That's when they put up the Mishkan. And then there was the sin a few weeks later, very shortly afterwards, with the spies. Next time he talks to Moshe Rabbeinu was the 40th year. 38 years went by. So Moshe is saying the time we spent traveling all that way for 38 years until that whole generation of warriors had perished from the camp. As Hashem had sworn concerning them. It's exactly what I just told you. So Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, 38 years passed until they all were gone. The hand of Hashem struck them to root them out from the camp until they all were finished off. When all the warriors among the people had died off, Hashem spoke to me, saying, From this, the rabbis learn that Moshe Rabbeinu, that God did not talk to him for 38 years. This indicates what I just said. Consequently, we learn from this, that's when that generation stopped dying. And one more thing for tonight, based on time and all. We haven't learned it yet. It might take a little while, but this will be the last one for tonight with Tu B'Av. I've made reference 1,000 times in our Tuesday and Thursday classes to the idea and fact that in the future, when we get to the book of Kings, 2 Kings, Melachim Bet, we're going to read we're going to learn the tragedy of the civil war that divided Eretz Yisrael, the Jewish kingdom, into two kingdoms. The northern kingdom with the capital of Samaria, Shomron, that became known as the northern kingdom, or the country of Israel. It was known as Israel, with the capital of Samaria. And the southern kingdom that became known as the kingdom, either the northern kingdom, southern kingdom, or it was known as Judea, Yehuda, with the capital of Jerusalem. And there were two separate kingdoms. And they were at war. And it was sometimes like the United States and Canada, where everything's good, and sometimes like the United States and Mexico, where sometimes it's very nice. And in the 1840s, we took Texas from them, and we took California from them, and it wasn't as nice. And we killed Santa Anna after he killed Davy Crockett. It wasn't so nice. So that's what it was like between Yehuda, Judea, and Shomron. Okay. When it wasn't so nice, during the years that it wasn't so nice, in the north, they had a problem. What was the problem? Even though the 10 tribes of the north were loyal to the north and had no desire to reunite with the south, came Yom Kippur. They all wanted to go down to Yerushalayim. There was only one Beit HaMikdash. And how in those days could you have Yom Kippur without being at the Beit HaMikdash? Nowadays, you have your shul, you have all kinds of things, and we don't even have a Beit HaMikdash right now. But in those days, that's what they had. They didn't have shuls. They had the Beit HaMikdash. And the people in the north, it's Yom Kippur. I don't want to be part of that country, but I want to go to the Beit HaMikdash. And so the king of the north kings of the north became more and more concerned. Too many of our population keep going down to Yerushalayim every year for the Beit HaMikdash. And they're losing that feeling of how much we hate each other. Because for the average Jew, they didn't hate each other so much. The kings were at war. The average Jew, these are my brothers. Yehuda, Benjamin, why not? It's the same Hebrew. We're the only two countries in the world that speak Hebrew. We're the only two countries in the world that descend from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. We're the only two to have the Torah. What's this business? Maybe we shouldn't be at war. Maybe we should be. So the northern kings came up with the idea, we are going to ban all citizens in the north from going south to Jerusalem. And we're setting up guard, sort of like the East Germans at the end of World War II, that the Berlin Wall, or like the Soviet Union keeping Jews, they wouldn't let people out. The Germans would not let East Germans out, and they wouldn't let people out. So the kings of the north would not let Jews from the north through to Jerusalem. And after many, many years, it was on a 15th of Av, just so happened to be that the decree came down, we're opening the gates and we're letting people. So let's see that text and we'll close with that. Ula Omar, the rabbi from Babylonia of the Talmud by the name of Ula, he taught, that was an Aramaic name, and a lot of the rabbis in the Talmud are known just by a first name. Yom Shabitel Hoshea ben Elah, Prostayot Shahoshiv Yarava ben Arat al Hadrachim, Shlo Ya'alu Yisrael Rega. That was the day, the 15th of Av, that the king Hoshea, not to be confused with King Yoshia. The other day we learned about King Josiah in the south. This is King Hoshea in the north. That's the day, 15th of Av, that he canceled the guards that the founding king of the north, Yeravam ben Nevat, had placed on the road so that the Jews would not be able to ascend to Jerusalem for the pilgrim festivals. As he said, Le'eza sheyirtzu ya'alu. Those who want to go up to Jerusalem, go up. And there's one more thing, but we don't have time. So I want to thank you, and let me take a quick look as to whether there's any chat or questions, and then we'll call it at night. Let's see what we have. Okay. Thank you so very, very much. And I look forward to seeing you, God willing, on Sunday. And Tuesday, we'll go back to regular Navi. And Thursday, we'll continue with these Gemaras for like another class or two. And then we'll go, we'll continue with our basic theme as well. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.